Hey everyone, welcome to another live stream. So today I'm going to be going through a couple of essay responses, as is always the plan. I mean, if there are enough questions that are urgent, then we'll deal with those first. So anyone watching, you are welcome to submit your questions. It might be questions about assessments that you have coming up. It might be about particular texts that you're studying. You might want advice with study techniques, strategy. Could be anything school related, exam related, English or otherwise. Make sure you are submitting your questions using the link that is below these live stream videos on the YouTube channel. That is how you can get feedback on your work. And while the live streams are live, then that's when you can actually submit your questions live if they're not so much about getting direct feedback on a response, but just about how to approach a particular essay question, or how do I approach this type of assessment, or how do I balance my time between X and Y at school. So that is how to get the most out of these live streams. Use the link below these videos on YouTube if you want to submit your own work for real life feedback to complement other sources of feedback that you're using. Maybe it's through JeddAI. JeddAI is Jeddle's AI-powered feedback platform where you can get immediate feedback based on the specific rubrics that are being used to mark your exams. So it's the most relevant type of feedback that you can get from AI or real life human markers as well, who are experts on those different texts. So that's what JeddAI allows you to get. So you can go to jeddle.com, check out JeddAI, and you can get feedback that way. Otherwise, you've got the live streams here, and you can also ask your questions. So we've got Yesui or Yesui. I don't know how to pronounce that one, but thanks for the question. For the first draft, how much time should I spend? How much time should you spend on your first draft? Well, that's a really good question, and it's interesting because there are kind of two schools of thought, right? One would be spend a long time on it to get it as perfect as possible, right? Don't rush it. Make sure you put all of your research and time and energy and resources into that draft so that you're doing a lot of the hard work, a lot of the heavy lifting up front. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought is get through the first draft as quickly as possible and then spend all of your time editing the draft and refining it and trying to adapt it to other questions and figuring out how you can make it better. And my answer is, and my personal experience is, it's a little bit of both, which I know is not a great answer, but I tend to lean more in favor of the second approach. So get a first draft out relatively quickly, but the key is not so much how much time you should spend on that first draft, but how much time in advance of the assessment should you be finishing the first draft. And that's really the key thing. It's not so much about how much time you spend on it. It's how early in the preparation process are you getting the first draft done, and it's as early as possible. That's the key. That's where you can stand out. Now, because you want to get it done as early as possible, so you have so much time to perfect it, to get feedback, to iterate, to make it better and better, so that you end up having a 10th draft version that you end up really relying on for your exam or assessment. To do that, you need to have a huge window of time. And to have that huge window of time before your assessments where you're getting feedback and improving the first draft, that means you don't want to spend forever on the first draft. Because if you try to perfect the first draft and you're trying to get every word right in the first place, rather than actually just getting something out, knowing that it's not perfect, but getting kind of a scaffold at least in place and getting the main ingredients into that first draft, if you are too preoccupied with making it perfect first go, you're not going to have enough time later to get feedback, implement the feedback, improve it, practice new questions. What you want to build towards is a perfect draft, but the first draft is the first of many drafts. The perfect draft is going to come 5 to 10 drafts later. So the answer is don't spend too much time on the first draft. Focus on putting a lot of thought and care into the structure. So what are the key themes or ideas of your body paragraphs? That's the first question I'd be trying to answer, and try and be really clear on that. So you have a very clear scaffold and structure. The students who rush through the essays in a negative way are the ones who haven't really thought about how the body paragraphs or how the key ideas actually progress. How do they tie together? So put a lot of your energy for the first draft into that structure, very high level thinking. Like, okay, the theme of the first body paragraph is going to be this. That then is going to progress into this, which is more in the middle of the text. And then I work towards my resolution, which I'm going to phrase as this. Okay, so you create those topic sentences first, and then you think about the kind of evidence that you have to support each of those points or themes or body paragraph ideas. And then you start making the first draft of them, but just with core elements. Okay, here's my technique, here's my quote, here's the effect, more or less. But it's not perfect. You haven't got that sophistication and flow and flair straight away. But at least you've got something down on paper, and you have something to work with. But you have something to work with within a broader structure that's actually really solid. So if you get the topic sentences / ideas right in the first place for the first draft, and you put most of your attention on that, and then don't worry as much about the other things, but get the relevant examples into those body paragraphs, and then you can come to the introduction last, and you can even just dot point the intro to start with, and then do something very rough for the first version of the intro, and then the conclusion as well. That's going to put you in the best spot to then work with that, sit down with the material, and create the second draft, which is where you start improving the sophistication levels of all of those things. But the key takeaway here is, in a first draft, the thing that you want to be the most sophisticated for the first draft, the thing that you should be thinking the most about, is the progression of the ideas, the themes, if you will, but not theme words like, oh, this paragraph's about love, this paragraph's about war. No, it's what's the first idea? What is the problem in the text that I'm going to introduce in the first paragraph? Well, the first paragraph, I'm going to talk about how power has the ability to corrupt individuals when ... It's like, okay, you're giving me an actual cause and effect statement that power can cause corruption if this. So you're actually giving me a concept to think about. And then your next paragraph goes into the however. Maybe there's an alternative perspective on that. However, individuals who prioritize their integrity above the approval of others, or above a sense of belonging, maintain the potential to live a true and free life. And then that might be your second concept. And then the third one will be, nonetheless, unless a collective of people are willing to sacrifice their sense of belonging for a sense of individual freedom, then society will remain corruptible. Okay, so you have like a 3-point structure that you've really thought about, that you know you have examples for based on how the text moves forward. So think about the beginning, the middle, and the end in terms of that structure. And then you get the examples in there. You can dot point things to start with, get it all down, and then you make the next 3-4 drafts based on that scaffold. But you really need to have the concepts clear as early as possible. And then you're doing more kind of specific edits and fine tuning, if you will, to improve the sophistication of the language. But the ideas you kind of want to try and set in place early on. So that's a long answer to the question as to how to think about the draft and the first draft. Get the first draft done as early as possible, but focus on the concepts for each paragraph, if nothing else. Then get everything else in, and then get lots of feedback after, and keep drafting and keep reading through it. Read your essays out loud. That is the way you'll be able to pick up on any kind of fluctuations in the flow or the sophistication. So, okay, that was sophisticated, and then I felt like that got really clunky. You need to read it out loud to yourself, sentence by sentence. Keep reading back, obsess over it, become more obsessive over the sentences as you go further along the drafting process. Don't obsess over things straight away. Obsess over them at the 5th draft stage, okay? Because that's when you're really trying to perfect every word and every sentence. But if you do that too early on, you'll never get to that point, and you'll never get to the point of practicing different questions. Okay, so that is the first question. I'm just going to look at a follow-up question here from Yesui. For my school, they prefer around 8 techniques per poem in multimodal that requires 2 poems in the video, but the video is only max 4 minutes. So how would I manage doing that? I don't know if this is really a follow-up question, but it's another question. It's a good one. They want 8 techniques per poem in a multimodal that requires 2 poems in the video. The video is a maximum of 4 minutes. So you've got to create a video with essentially what is a spoken essay as the voiceover. So you're going to provide a visual presentation with you presumably speaking over the top. And what you're basically saying when you're speaking is just an essay, but you're going to make sure it's a little bit more personalized. It's a little bit more calibrated to the audience and to the nature of the task. So it might not be strictly speaking an essay as you would write it in an exam, but it's going to sound very similar in terms of the analysis. Now, 4 minutes, maybe you can only do 2 paragraphs. Sounds like two body paragraphs will work for that. 4 minutes, introduction, 2 body paragraphs, short conclusion. The 2 body paragraphs are going to be on 1 poem each. That gets the 2 poem requirement satisfied. And then your school's saying they want 8 techniques per poem. So that's 16 techniques. So you need 8 techniques per body paragraph if we're doing 2 body paragraphs, because 3 body paragraphs or more is not realistic for 4 minutes. I can tell you that straight off the bat. So I'd be aiming for 2 bodies, maybe only a 3-sentence introduction, a slightly shorter introduction than normal, and maybe a 1 to 2 sentence conclusion, possibly a 1-sentence conclusion, because with a 4-minute multimodal, it's all about priorities. You're not going to get marked down in a 4-minute presentation where they're valuing the analysis a lot because they want 18 techniques total by having only 1 sentence as the conclusion. So I would have one, now the more I'm thinking about it as I speak, 1-sentence conclusion, 3 sentences for the introduction and no more. And then that's going to free up enough room, hopefully, maybe 200 to 250 words per body paragraph for you. I think probably, yeah, you're getting up to maybe 250 maximum per body paragraph, but you have to practice and time yourself, of course. But let's say you got 200 to 250 words per body paragraph, 2 body paragraphs, 2 poems. What I would do is, to get the 8 techniques, I would try and bundle as many techniques together as possible. No, well, let me rephrase that. I wouldn't do as many as possible. You'll end up just listing off techniques. But I would try and combine techniques where possible, is a better way of saying it. So, for instance, if you've got a quote, it might have a metaphor in it, but it might also be an example of first person, the first person voice. So the first person voice is present in the quote because it says I or my, but it also has a metaphor. So you pair 2 things together there. You can have a macro technique like the voice, the first person style, like a narration style typically called, right, for the poem. So first person voice, and then you've got, or first person perspective, combined with the metaphor within the quote. And there you've got 2. You can also juxtapose 2 techniques within the same sentence. So I'm just thinking of how you can be efficient with the techniques. You can say, whereas the simile or whereas the imagery depicts this, comma, the anadiplosis or some other technique does this, and maybe they're contrasting each other. Or you could just say this technique contrasts with this one, and it has this one effect. So contrasting or pairing together techniques within the same sentence is really the key. And that's going to allow you to get 2 techniques within a sentence without listing them. You don't really want to list them, but you can say the use of a simile coupled with a metaphor or something, right? You can couple them. So you could say this partnered or coupled with this produces this effect. It has this effect on the reader. So if you can find 2 short quotes that have 2 different techniques and they achieve a similar effect, or they even work together to amplify a particular effect, then you can say one technique coupled by another technique, comma, depicts this, portrays this. Okay, that's option. Let's go through 3 ways you could do it. That's option 1. Option 2 is you introduce a technique and then you juxtapose or contrast it with another one, and you talk about the contrast between those 2 techniques. So the contrast between simile in this quote and metaphor in this quote reveals this. And the contrast itself is a technique. So that's 3 techniques in one sentence. The juxtaposition or contrast between technique A, like simile, and technique B, like metaphor, achieves this effect. So you get 3 in one sentence by doing a contrast. Okay, so pairing techniques together in the same sentence because they achieve a similar effect. Contrasting or juxtaposing techniques together with the different quotes will allow you to use multiple techniques in the one sentence, or you could split it up into 2 sentences if it gets clunky. And then the third one was what I said initially, which was to combine the form or the stylistic elements, the macro features, such as the narration style or the first person perspective, with a micro or specific technique. Okay, so first person perspective is facilitating, you could say facilitated or framed through a first person perspective or the speaker's first person perspective. There's a macro technique, comma. The simile, the metaphor, the personification in this quote reveals this. So you're kind of bringing in the macro technique of the form or the genre. You might say facilitated by the sonnet form and say something about it being a sonnet, and then couple that with a specific technique. So you can do the macro-micro technique pairing. You could do a contrast or a juxtaposition between 2 different things that are kind of contradicting each other, and maybe that's producing an effect. And then you can also, of course, just couple 2 specific techniques together. It doesn't need to be a macro and a micro. It could just be metaphor and simile together, achieving the same effect. There are 3 ways that you can get at least 2 techniques into the same sentence of analysis. And then you can do 4 sentences of analysis per paragraph. That's going to get you your 8 techniques per poem, per paragraph. And it's going to get you to do it by only having 6 sentences in total per paragraph, because you've got a topic sentence, 4 sentences of analysis, each with 2 techniques, and a link sentence. That's going to get it done in 4 minutes. Okay, hope that helps. Let's go back to Nala. Great to see you again. Getting very familiar with your name on here. So when I write the essay, I write feeling there is much to say. When I write the essay, I write feeling there is much to say. You mean much more to say? Let me know what you mean, Nala, by that. When I write the essay, I write feeling there's much. Yeah, let me know exactly what you mean by that question. You've also got this follow-up. We have to try to come up with a unique insight, something that others haven't observed, because there are so many English students and the examiners are reading essay after essay. Yes, they are reading lots of essays, but here's the trick. You don't need to come up with a brand new idea. You don't need to come up with a brand new idea to get good marks. Yes, markers are reading thousands of essays on the same text. Yes, they do get bored of reading the same thing. But you do not need to literally be a genius and come up with this unique insight that no one before has ever thought of to get good marks. What you need to do is word it, phrase it in a way that they're not used to seeing. And that comes down to sophistication, which will come from research. If you look at perspectives on texts and kind of familiarize yourself with vocabulary that the markers won't be used to, and have kind of a unique way of framing the ideas aren't going to be that unique. But if you have a unique way of expressing them and you're using a different kind of vocabulary, maybe slightly figurative language at times, then that is going to stand out. So it's the way you're presenting the ideas, the type of language, being a little bit playful with the language at times, and the way you do that, rather than me just saying do it, you research academic articles on JSTOR, Google Scholar. I'll show you in a second how you can do this. Don't rely on GPT for citations of academics. It's really not that good for that particular purpose. So I would just go straight to Google Scholar, JSTOR. The Jeddle resources also have a further readings and critical reading section. That's where you can look at those advanced perspectives, but more importantly, get used to the vocabulary and the type of phrasing that's used for these ideas. And then you can incorporate that and practice using that terminology in your own work. So it's not that you're saying something profoundly unique that only you have thought of. It's very unlikely that anyone in year 12, let alone year 7 to 11, is going to have an original idea about something. But what you can do, right? I never had original ideas about them, but what I did do, what you can do, is expose yourself to people who have had original ideas in the past, reconcile them, collate, group together the best ofs, find the best expressions that you've seen about this idea of power in the text. They're all talking about the same thing, but I haven't heard it said that way before. Okay, great. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to make a document that has these extracts from really smart academics and critics who have written about these texts, and I'm going to try and work them into my own piece. I'm going to make it my own. I'm not just going to copy and paste a paragraph from someone else, because you will get caught for that. That's plagiarism. You shouldn't do that. But what you do is you take snippets and you practice working it in, and then you make it your own. That's what the best students do. They expose themselves to high-level perspectives that are written by academics that go beyond the standard ideas, not just the standard ideas, the standard wording. It's about the wording of ideas, and it gives them a little bit more specificity, okay? So on that note of specificity, that's the other thing. Not only can you say things using a different lens or a different kind of phrasing, you could talk about power in many different ways. If you can say it in a different way because you've exposed yourself to different perspectives through online research, what you can also do is whenever you mention something like context or form or an idea, is you can always force yourself to be a little bit more specific, add a little bit more detail. Okay, I referred to postmodernism. Everyone's saying postmodernism. How can I go beyond it? I could say something about postmodernism, and I could say it very subtly. Instead of saying shaped by Atwood's postmodern context, we could say shaped by the secular values of Atwood's postmodern context. And that's just an example of one level up, because postmodernism is typically accompanied by secularism. It tends to disagree with the objective truth and traditions that are embedded in religion. So postmodernism would typically go against religion. It would actually try to subvert religious belief and tradition, because it doesn't believe that there's any one objective truth. And it tries to destabilize all of those traditional power structures. Okay, so if you can actually tell us something about that contextual term, like postmodernism, you can actually add a layer of specificity shaped by the secular values of the postmodern context. Just adding that little bit in before is going to help you stand out. But again, even in that example, me saying secular values of the postmodern context, right, is not me saying anything new. It's not a unique perspective, but I'm being specific. Therefore, I'm being more sophisticated than most people, and therefore you'll stand out. So try and present unique vocabulary, because you've actually done some research on academics and scholars using Google Scholar, JSTOR, Jeddle, using those kind of resources, right? That'll help you stand out. And then secondly, being more specific whenever you mention something to do with context or form, that's going to allow you to stand out. So there are the two ways to stand out that you can focus on. You don't need to have any kind of original thought as such, but it is important to expose yourself to unique perspectives that you might not have considered. Doesn't mean you have to come up with a unique perspective. You just have to collect the best of materials to give yourself that edge. Okay, so that's what I would focus on to stand out. Don't overcomplicate it, and don't have this kind of expectation that I've got to come up with something completely new. You're better off just doing a bit of extra research, incorporating some new vocabulary, and you're already miles ahead of everyone. That's the best and most realistic approach here to get top marks, not to set this crazy standard and expectation of coming up with your own unique thoughts. That won't happen for a while, most likely. Some of you will have some original takes, which is amazing. Even if you could just have one original take or one original perspective on anything, throughout your whole time in high school, if you came up with something on your own, that's incredible, but it is not expected of you, okay? It's expected that you understand and expose yourself to other perspectives and then can kind of reconcile those and present your argument. That's what you need to aim for. Now, I was going to show you an example of what I was talking about with Google Scholar. So let's jump on there and let me show you what I mean here, okay? So I'm going to show you what you can all do to research really quickly and find some better vocabulary so that you're not sounding like every other student, okay? So let's hide this, present this. This is exciting. Okay, Google Scholar, here I am. I just went on to Google, typed in Google Scholar, just like Google Images, right? It's its own part of Google, and it will expose you to different articles written by experts on the text that you're studying, and then it will give you some different perspectives to play with and to also educate you. Like, it's going to teach you, just like a teacher in the classroom is presenting perspectives, you can research these, but then you can also absorb some unique vocabulary to go with it. So where am I best suited? Down here. All right, let's see if this makes sense to you. So if you were studying, let's just use a generic one here for everyone, okay? Let's say you're studying Othello, okay? You're studying Othello. I'm going to type in Othello, okay? Othello. People often like to do critical analysis. It's good if you already know something specific about the text or the context, or you have some kind of really good term that you can put in, because you can see the suggestions here. I mean, if we just put in literary criticism, it's going to be pretty generic. All of this stuff is literary criticism. All of this stuff is critical analysis. But if we have something that we know that we really want to focus on, or a term that is appropriate to what we're studying, so we might say Othello. Maybe I want a feminist perspective. Okay, maybe I want a feminist perspective. Okay, then what Google Scholar does is it loads up these different perspectives here. So I always go off the number of citations, so cited by one. Well, I go by relevance and citations. So look to see if someone else has referred back to this piece. That usually means that it's pretty good. Let's see if we can see some citations. See how this one says cited by 33? Cited by 33. It doesn't mean that it's the most relevant one. I mean, I always then look at the title and what it's saying. But it's cited by 33 people. So it's probably pretty good. So then I click on that. And if you are a student and you've got I believe it's a New South Wales University or the Library of New South Wales membership, then you can get access to JSTOR and a lot of these kind of sources here, because I'm not sure I'm going to get onto this one, but let's see. I mean, this is I'm about to like download like a Trojan horse or something here, but it says ebook. Sometimes, yeah, it gives you a price, but I believe with your library accounts or even school accounts, you'll be able to get onto a lot of these. If I can't get onto this one, what I would do is I would copy that. I'm going to paste that into another tab. So I'm going to now show you, I've gone to the other tab. A little bit of research, a little bit of extra digging here to see if we can track something down. Oh, there we go. See how that says JSTOR? That's what you can all get onto. I might not be able to get onto it right now on this account, but if you are a member of a library, I think it's just the New South Wales Library. If you are a member, you should get access to JSTOR, or even via your school, you might have access. Okay. But look at this. See, okay, we're onto part of it. We're making progress here. On the other version, I couldn't get into anything. I just Google searched the name of the article and the name of the person, and then here we are, right? Let's see if this is still going to share. All right. The point is, then you come onto these kind of reviews that really smart people have spent a lot of their life thinking about and putting together for you to benefit from. What you do is you see if anything kind of connects with you and you're like, okay, I really like the way that's worded, and you try and incorporate that into your own work. You don't copy paste whole chunks. As I said, you will get done for plagiarism. But what you do is you look for key vocabulary, key expressions that you like. Let's have a look here. Even if it's not directly to do with Othello. Since a primary goal of cultural materialism is to intervene in the reproduction of oppressive ideological systems. Just reading this stuff makes you smarter. If you have to go and Google some words to understand what it means, or you get ChatGPT to, you can copy paste that, put it into ChatGPT and say, can you simplify this? What does this mean? Express this in a way that a 12-year-old would understand. That will help you understand what it's saying. But you just get smarter reading through this kind of research, these kind of articles, okay? And then what you do is you yourself in your essay start using expressions like oppressive ideological systems, okay? It sounds good, right? You can make sure you understand what that means, an oppressive ideological system. Like a belief system could be a political system that is oppressive, that is harmful to individuals. Usually it takes away people's freedom. Okay, that's what it means. I'm going to use that term now. It also says cultural materialism. I like that phrase. How many people in the state do you think are saying cultural materialism, that phrase? Not many, right? So if you can understand it, if you can actually connect with that and think, oh, I know how I could use that. I can use that here in my essay. Or better yet, you can actually have a kind of base level understanding and think, I actually want to mold this example around this idea of cultural materialism. Great. Now you can use that vocabulary and you can stand out. You don't have to use the whole sentence. You just weave in the key vocabulary here. And you have a separate Google document and you can just make a list of these expressions that you really like. Make sure you understand what they mean. And then when you create your essay draft, you can kind of dot point out where you might be able to use different pieces of these articles that seemed relevant. You can connect them to what you already have in your very simple draft. And suddenly you're taking your essay from here to here. Okay, I hope that is making sense. So you go through these articles, you'll have to sift through quite a few, find a couple of paragraphs that are super relevant, find some nice material that you think is helpful, and then go from there. Just seeing here if we can get anything else here. All right. Now, I know I'm just scrolling through. None of this is probably making sense. But again, if you find one that seems relevant, and I'll just go back over here for a second. A feminist critique of Othello doesn't have to have a lot of citations, by the way. It just is good validation. It just means it's probably good. Oh, look at this. Straight away, wow, we're in, okay? It's like crack it into a vault. You only have to look at a couple of these. Don't look at too many, but the best students look at these, okay? A feminist critique of Othello. In the play Othello, we encounter many forward-thinking actions and characters for the Venetian era, but we also see the opposite viewpoints as well. While looking at this play through a feminist viewpoint, we're given the tools to analyze Let's see if we can find something cool. Okay, expectations of the Venetian patriarchal society. That's a nice phrase. That's a nice phrase. So you might use that. Privileges in patriarchal marriages. The suppression and restriction of femininity. Lovely expression. They're the kinds of things you can incorporate. No one's got a trademark on the suppression of femininity. That is a phrase you could all use if it's relevant at some point in your essay. In this case, an essay about Othello. It's just an example. Then it breaks down the characters. Great thing about this is it's going to have lots of short quotes that you might also be able to work into your essay to improve your analysis. See how this person does it? Do it yourself. Iago's desire for revenge on Othello is dictated by his view of women as possessions. He believes that it is thought abroad that twixt my sheets had done my office. It even shows you ways that you could seamlessly weave in a quote. See how the quote there is woven into the sentence so that it doesn't have a pause before it. A lot of students put commas before their quotes. You can actually you can take this as a model of how to weave in a quote without having to stop before it, right? Now, this one's pretty simple, actually. It's pretty accessible. You can read through it. You might find a few things, a few kind of gems, but that is the idea. So I don't know. Let me know in the comments if that helps, just me showing you how to do that. But you go into Google Scholar, right? You go you find articles that will open for you. And again, check if you've got that library membership. If you can't get into the JSTOR articles, you literally collate the best of phrases, make a dot point list of where they might fit into an essay structure and use them yourself. It is that simple. That's what I did throughout my final year of school. That's how I was getting full marks in all of my essays, to be honest with you, right? And I don't say that, again, to brag, but in essays, I would always do that process, and that's how I was getting full marks. Thinking carefully about the structure of my argument, and I did some thinking myself on that, but I was obviously guided by the teacher and the common examples that were shown to us, and figuring out how I could structure it myself. But then I knew I'm going to outwork everyone on the research side, and I'm going to go on to all of these resources. I'm going to collate all of the extracts from all of these best things, and I'm going to use language that no one else is using. And that's how I'm going to get an edge. Because otherwise, I wasn't really saying anything that original. I just had so much sophistication in my vocabulary because I was putting in the work on the outside to say the same thing in a better way. And the funny thing is, you do that, and it's almost like fake it till you make it, if you're familiar with that expression. I love that expression, by the way. I think it's so helpful in life. Fake it till you make it. Okay, pretend you are the academic. Pretend you can write like that. And do you know what happens after enough time? You start writing like these academics yourself. Naturally, it just happens. So it's like when I finished school, I've done a ton of tutoring in my time and gone through it. I'm not saying I'm as good as the academics writing these articles, but I found that I was able to write with those expressions naturally myself. I internalized it because I practiced it so much that it actually became second nature. So now I can pull it up. I can kind of write with those expressions because I have a broader vocabulary and I've practiced doing it so much. But I still always do the research if I want to stand out, because you're never going to know more than what's on the internet and what's out there in all those articles, right? So I'm not saying you get to a point that you no longer need it. I'm saying that kind of language becomes natural to you, and therefore you actually do up your sophistication, even if you were faking it to begin with because you were borrowing off other academics. That's my point. Okay. And I'm glad to hear that it is better than tutoring. It is free. That's why I do it. I do this for free to help you because, it's hard to get the right help. There are a lot of tutors out there. I do a bit of tutoring myself, right? Still, because I like to keep sharp on all of this. And I like to, obviously, I have Jeddle. It's not a tutoring company, but we provide resources, and we need to know exactly what students are needing help with and what teachers are needing help with. So the tutoring piece is really important for me to be sharp on all of that and to just keep lifting my experience and ability with it. But it's important you guys are coming on here to get the right kind of advice, because it's proven advice. This is what I see students actually achieve results with, versus, there are, to be honest with you, hundreds of tutors out there who might have got a good mark, but they don't actually know how to replicate the results. So that's why we created Jeddle as well. So appreciate you guys tuning in for this as well. Now, let me see what other questions we're up to. Again, I come on here with the intention to get through some reviews. I've got some essay reviews that I'm looking at, but I always want to prioritize your questions because they might be more pressing or more urgent. So Lexi says, how do I prepare for English Advanced HSC during this week of holiday? Should I start making skeleton essays? Okay, Lexi, good question. So how should you all be preparing for the HSC? Or you might not be doing HSC. How do you prepare for the year ahead, whatever year you're in, whatever state you're watching from? I know we've got some people from Victoria as well, VCE. How do you prepare this far ahead of time? Well, this is actually the perfect time to, first of all, not try and do everything. It's the perfect time to not try and do everything, but rather get ahead with the next unit of study and do some catching up on the previous unit of study. So what I mean by that is, if you just did a particular module and you just got examined on it, maybe you've already got marks back and feedback, implement that feedback over this break and improve it, because you're going to come back to it sooner than you think before your trials. Okay, so whatever unit you just did, implement the feedback or continue to improve it if you haven't yet got the other feedback, so you can park that and come back to it later. But make sure it is in a sufficient position to be ready for your trial exam. So I would focus on the module you just did, or one module you did in the past, even before that needs to be caught up. You're not up to speed with one of those units. You did really poorly with an exam. let's say you did really poorly with the common module in term 4 last year. So you had an assessment last year, end of last year, you got a poor mark, you haven't really improved it since. Improve that draft now. I would spend half of the time for the remainder of this break doing that, so that you're not playing too much. You don't want to play too much catch up when you get to trials, because you've got to study for so many other subjects as well. So focus on one unit of study that you've already done, and I would take the weakest one, or the one that is the least in shape for the trials. So if you did the common module end of last year for the HSE, then you might have a related text paragraph in there, and you don't have a third paragraph on the prescribed text. Well, in the trials and in the final HSE, you're not going to have a related text. So you need to get that out of there and get a third paragraph in, and make sure it is exam ready now, because that's not exam ready if you still have the related text in there. And if you got a 13 out of 20 or a 16 out of 20 or even an 18 out of 20, get it to a 20 out of 20, or get it as close to it as possible by implementing the feedback that you got and reading over it and getting feedback from others and improving it. So that would be half my time, just to simplify it. Half my time is on your weakest previous unit of study. If you don't have a weakest, the one you just did, get it up to date. And then the other thing you need to be doing is getting ahead of the next unit, because next term is going to go really quickly. And then before you know it, you've got your trials, and then you got final HSE. So to avoid that huge rush that is inevitable, that is going to happen, to mitigate that, to at least make it bearable, get ahead for the next unit of study now. So if you're about to study module A or module B and you've got to prepare another essay, do all your reading now. Watch the film, read all the poetry, read all the analysis and summaries of the poetry in the novel. Always read summaries first, I find, just to give yourself a bit of context. Then read the novel, then read the poetry, just so you know what's going on when you're looking at it, and you'll save a lot of time and confusion. So read summaries, go and look at your actual text for the next unit. Know it well, take some annotations and notes, start building a draft essay, put the scaffold together based on how you're going to be examined. So if it's module C, craft of writing, you could start planning out and actually drafting an imaginative piece or a persuasive piece. So you draft it out and you get as much as you can, you get as much done as possible for that next unit of study. Get ahead, because it's going to catch up faster than you think. So, or it's going to basically arrive. The date of that exam is going to arrive faster than you think, and you won't have as much time to prepare as you think. So 2 things to focus on only this break. It's a short break. I hear a lot of students trying to do everything, and I'll do a little bit each day on everything. No, just focus on 1 or 2 things. One previous unit, spend a day or 2 tightening up that response. A day or 2, meaning a couple of hours, 1 or 2 days. So maybe you do like 4 or 5 hours on one unit, and then you get ahead with the next one. And that's it. Once you've looked at the previous unit, move on to the current unit. Don't be between 2 units. That's another key. When you're revising, don't be switching. There's a switching cost in your attention and concentration when you go between 2 different things. So spend 1 or 2 days on one module, park it, it's done. You're not coming back to it till before trials. That's how fast the term will go. That's how fast the year goes. So make the most of that time. Have a clear plan of what you want to get out of it. Then you move on and you get ahead for the next thing that's coming in the next few weeks or the next term. And that's all you focus on until you go back to school. Okay, so 2 things maximum to focus on. Be realistic about it. The more things you put on your plate, the less likely you are to do any of it. Trust me, I understand. You should see when these days, right? Like, running Jeddle, we've got a million things to do. I've got a to-do list of 1,000 things, right? If I look too hard at that 1,000-thing list, I'm doing nothing that day, okay? But if I just have one thing on the list for the day, I say, I just want to do that. That's the most important thing right now. It's the most urgent thing. It's the most important thing. I can look at that list of one thing and I can tick it off. Or I could maybe have up to 3 things, but not 3 really important big tasks. So you've got to be realistic. Don't overwhelm yourself cognitively. It's too much to bear to have 5 different modules that you're trying to do in a week or 2, okay? So be thoughtful about that. All right. I'm just going to have a look at some of the other questions coming through here. Module C assessment currently sitting on internal 100, but Module C seems like the end of this. Okay, so that's great that you're on an internal 100. Fantastic, Shabad. So, and I hope I'm saying that correctly. That's incredible. So, what's more important, and for anyone watching this, don't worry if you're not on 100 or 90 or whatever. What's most important is your rank. So you're just going to try and improve your rank as much as you can before the HSC, because that's really the only thing that will matter before the exams. Okay, but amazing. Congratulations on being on full marks so far. Module C seems like the end of it. Maybe that's your weakness. That's the Achilles heel, right? You don't feel as confident with imaginative writing or writing a persuasive or a discursive. You love the structure of an essay. You love the predictability of that type of question. I know what I can do. I've got all the vocabulary. I've got the structures. I'm good at memorizing things. Great. That was your advantage. Now you've got to spend a disproportionate amount of time, by the sounds of it, to make up for any deficiencies in your natural ability. You can still get 100 in craft of writing, even if you're not naturally a good creative writer. It will just take more time preparing, and you almost have to turn it into a little bit of a game, almost make it a bit more of a structure, an essay-like structure to suit the way you operate, okay? So what I mean by that is, when you're preparing for Module C assessment, say you've got to write an imaginative, kind of break it down into pieces, almost like an essay structure has an introduction, body and conclusion. When you have an imaginative, you might say, my first paragraph is going to be a really confronting opening, like a critical thing has just happened. Okay, that's a subheading. Critical thing happens. Then the next paragraph, like you're saying, okay, then after that critical thing happens, this response happens, and then this is like imagery about the setting. The setting's going to reflect the character's mood, and then what's going to happen. And you kind of like break up the paragraphs almost into different sections. Now, you don't have one paragraph per section in a creative, right? You obviously need to break that, and you need to have different paragraph lengths and different sentence lengths, right? It should flow and it should have variety, not just to be engaging to a marker, but actually to mirror the flow you're trying to create with the story, if it is a story. But what I find helpful is in the planning process for an imaginative piece, for example, is to actually create mini subheadings for each part with dot points of ideas and types of imagery and types of descriptions that I think are relevant there. I just dot point list it all. So you have a subheading. Okay, something critical happens, and hopefully you've already thought about the overall idea, and you can put in this thing happens, right? Capture this moment of tension. Then you dot point all the things you could focus on. I want to capture the look on my protagonist's face. He looks shocked. Okay, so the eyes are really wide, and his head kind of, is leaning back, and da 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 da. I'm describing all these different things, and you dot point all of that, and then you flesh it out, and you turn it into a nice paragraph or a nice section of the piece, okay? So I would work on structuring and planning your response like that, because if you break it up into little bite-sized chunks, it's far more fathomable, right? It's far more approachable. Now, yeah, so, and I'll come back to your comments there, just in the that you're putting in now. But step one, before you do all the little subheadings, is to, I find this useful, break up your piece into 3 parts. And it doesn't have to be a beginning, middle, and end, right? It doesn't have to be like there's an end to the story. You're just writing about a moment in time. Or if it's a discursive or a persuasive, you're just reflecting for a moment on something, right? It's a moment. It's not like a full story. But what I do is I break it up into 3 parts. And I say, look, part 1, this happens. Okay, so part 1, a man receives news of his mother's death. Okay, right, like kind of a tragic thing, discovery straight away, critical moment. In that morning that I heard the news of my mother's death. That's the first sentence. Okay, now I describe the reaction. I describe the expressions. How are they feeling after the mother's death? Then it goes on to the mystery of how it happened, and the maybe there's a lot of interrogation. Maybe there's a lot of mental reflection. Did I cause it? oh, I wonder if I took some days off of life. I was so mad at my mom the other day, right? I know it's a bit of a morbid topic here, but just first thing that came up. So you could have something tragic or something confronting, then you unpack the response of the character. I don't involve too many characters in an imaginative typically because it complicates things and it's hard to build authentic characters. Or it's hard to build one authentic character, let alone multiple within 600 to 800 words. So I would focus on one main character, but maybe you have a second character referred to, like in this case, the mother, recently deceased, the son who's reflecting on it. Maybe he's older. Maybe the son put his mother in a retirement home, and she died soon after. And it's like, okay, that's obviously really sad. We make it less tragic because she was older, but now he's questioning the decision to put her there. This is just a general example, by the way. The idea of your piece should be closely connected with the key idea of one of the prescribed texts from the Module C list. So whatever text you're focused on in terms of writing like that author, also look at what they write about and try and write about something similar or tangential, something related. Maybe you offer a different perspective on it, maybe a more modern take, but keep it somewhat similar would be my advice in terms of what you write about. But anyway, you can see with my example, you have like kind of 3 parts. Part 1, I'm going to focus on the news of the death. Part 2 is the character questioning whether it was his fault. Part 3, maybe there's a bit of irony and the character realizes that he can't do anything about it now, or maybe he's grateful. He's at least grateful for the last argument they had. Maybe at least triggered a memory of something nice from their childhood because he already felt like he lost his mother to dementia or something. I'm overcomplicating this example, but once you split it into 3 parts, then you have the subheadings for each mini part, which is like literally within those 3 parts. Okay, the first paragraph might not actually be a paragraph; it might be a 1-sentence paragraph, then 2 sentences, etc. But the first like mini section, you literally just write roughly what you want to write about for that section to support that broader part. And you dot point all the bits, types of imagery and descriptions that you could have, the things that happen and the descriptions. And after you have like 4 or 5 dot points, you flesh it out, you've suddenly got a big chunk of text. And as long as you're sticking to that original 3-part structure and it's all supporting that progression, the piece is going to make sense at the end of the day. If you don't think about those parts in advance and you don't know how the story ends, then it won't make sense, most likely. So never start writing your piece before you've planned it out and you understand very clearly how it ends. You don't have to have a traditional ending to your story, but you need to know what the final line's going to be, or what's the final point or the final part that happens. You never start writing before that. So I think, again, long answer here, but you approach it in a very structured way with a lot of planning, a lot of breakdowns of each part. Know what the ending's going to be before you even start doing the breakdowns. Map out the 3 parts. Don't have too much happen. Just have a lot of reflection and key moments, or a key moment being fleshed out. And make sure that there is a purpose, a clear message that comes through the piece. Have one clear message in mind. One thing you're trying to prove. What are you trying to show? I'm trying to reveal the conflicting emotions that one can feel when a loved one dies. The conflict between guilt and freedom. Okay, that's an interesting contradiction. This character might have felt the burden of looking after his elderly mother with dementia, but then he also feels guilt for putting her in a home, and now she's died basically straight away because she was more isolated. Okay, that's an interesting contrast. So you're exploring that. Know that you're exploring that before you start writing. Okay, you have that thesis, that argument, that exploratory topic. Have a topic or an issue that you want to unpack. Know roughly what your stance is or perspective, or at least know the different perspectives you're going to offer in the case of a discursive. And then break it down into those parts and then those dot points and then flesh it out. And that'll be the hard bit for you. The hardest bit technically is the planning, but then the hard bit, if you're not a good creative writer by nature, is going to be putting in the extra time to really flesh those out, but be guided by the prescribed text as well. There are lots of examples of how to actually write effectively there as well. Okay. Okay, cool. Glad that all makes sense. Show your progression. All right. Yeah, avoid arbitrary descriptions as well, as you say. I'm just checking all this. Crucible, really quickly, working on trial essay prep. What should the body paragraph structure be like? Where does context fit in? Okay, so with essays, context is never like a full paragraph, of course. It's something that should be woven in to the piece. I try to have at least 2 specific contextual references per body paragraph, and I definitely would mention the overall context in the introduction. Where do you put it? You can put it in the second sentence of the body paragraph after your topic sentence. So after you introduce the concept, you can then say, influenced by or inspired by or responding to the anxieties of McCarthyism, the widespread anxieties of McCarthyism, Miller's play does this. And you can almost have a second topic sentence that then speaks specifically about the contextual influence and what the play specifically explores in relation to that concept. That would be if you had a 2-part topic sentence, a second topic sentence, basically. The second sentence is more focused on the context and what happens in the text. The first topic sentence is more about the concept overall. You don't even mention the text. So you could do that approach, and that's one way you get context in. Or you just have the single topic sentence at the top, and then you start your analysis of the second sentence with the contextual reference. So responding to this, Miller's Crucible, begins with an allegory of witchcraft or something like that, and you bring in the specific example in the second sentence, and you start your analysis, but you begin the sentence with a reference to context. Somewhere else in a paragraph, link in the context to another example. And to answer your question, should you have context before or after your TQE, your technique, quote, effect? It could be either. I would actually mix them up, but by default, before you start playing around with the variation, what I would do is I would have it at the start of the sentence. So I would say, reflect in the anxieties of McCarthyism or the widespread, anti-communist hysteria of McCarthyism, comma, then get into the effect, right? And you draw a connection between the analysis and the context, but a specific contextual reference, okay? Now, you can also then have the TQE. You can say the metaphor in this does this, comma, end of the sentence, comma, reminiscent of, or which reflects, ... So you can have a comma at the end of your analysis and then link it to context, or you could open with the context by saying reflect in, ing, or shaped by, or inspired by, ... and then have a comma and then go into your analysis. So either at the start or the end. I by default would do the start, but then I mix it up after I've got everything down. Okay. Michael, good to see you again. Is it recommended to write about metafiction in the Mod C piece? One of my prescribed texts is That Crafty Feeling. Right, Zadie Smith. So could I write an imaginative about someone painting? Yes, it is good to write about metafiction, especially if your text is metafictional, then absolutely. I would recommend everyone try and have some kind of metafictional component because it's a good way to stand out. It's a more sophisticated technique. Okay, so metafiction is where a text is aware of itself as a text, or you have a text within a text. But having that kind of self-awareness of the speaker, so the speaker is kind of saying, as I write this piece, I think about this and this, right? So they're like, it's like the person writing it is reflecting on the process of writing. You're writing about the process of writing. That metafictional element is going to set you apart if you can execute it. So I would absolutely recommend that you do it. In terms of writing about someone painting, that might not be metafictional. It depends. I would write about writing. Otherwise, a metafictional or a meta painting would be someone painting an image of someone else painting. So it'd be like if you saw a painting and within the painting was someone painting a canvas. That would be meta painting. That would be metatextual, right? Because you've got a painting within the painting. If you're doing metafiction, you need to have fiction within the fiction. Sure, you could do it through a visual mode, but that gets a little bit murky there. I think it's going to be easy to do if it's something more writing based. So, and it doesn't have to be. You can not go with me on that, but having something that is someone reflecting on the process of writing, or someone reflecting on the nature of writing, or the types of writers, someone reflecting on writer's block, someone reflecting on kind of maybe two different ways of thinking about something connected to writing. So how do you build an authentic character? How do you build an authentic character in a story? Might be a question, right? So come up with a question and think about two different perspectives to answer that question. Or you can build an authentic character by projecting yourself into the story and thinking, how would I react? Or you could think about, of course, you could think about other people. I guess you could think about yourself and how you think you would react, or maybe you would do another option. I'm trying to think of another viable option so we could just have A and B as the option. So it's like, as I sit here now trying to create an authentic character, I can't help but feel torn between recreating just another version of myself, a doppelganger of myself, right? Like, how do you escape writing about yourself in a character that you're creating versus writing about someone imaginary, right? That's truly imaginary and it's not just a projection of yourself. I'm trying to think of what the other example would be. Maybe modeling it off another text. Maybe you have two options. You either create a character that is linked to yourself to write them authentically, or a character that you resonated with from another text, okay? This is just a rough example, but see how there's a couple of different takes on how you might get there? Then you just explore that process and you reflect on how you're reflecting it, right? As I sit here now trying to construct an authentic character for my piece, I can't help but feel torn between projecting just another version of myself or my favorite character from X, like some other text. But the point is, you have kind of two different things that you're reflecting on. I would do the metafictional element based on writing, though. More, it might be between fiction and non-fiction, but the painting one, the visual thing, might be a little bit harder to do. And why make it harder? And then relate how her memories influence her painting. So you can do the memories thing. Okay, sorry, I didn't even read your second comment, which would have helped with my example. Let's take the example of memories. So how do memories influence one's writing? Okay, and you can come up with two different ways or types of memories or types of writing or reasons that or ways that memories can impact one's writing. But again, instead of painting, I would do writing. Your memories might you might write out of your memory. So you're remembering something and then writing about it, or you're escaping your memory and writing something fresh. So there you go. You're either writing by projecting your memory. I'm remembering something and I'm therefore writing with that memory as fuel or something like that, or as a foundation. Maybe that's how you're coming up with your ideas. Or you're trying to get away from your memories. You're writing as an escape. And then you're drawing from external influences. So there's your dichotomy. You want to reach that dichotomy for these metafictional ones. What is your dichotomy? What is the binary split? Either you can write by drawing upon intrinsic, internal, memory-based inspiration sources, or you could draw from external sources. So it's either internal or external. And you can come up with an extended metaphor and a label, some fitting labels for those two, right? So you've got memory, there's the memory source, and there's the external source. And you don't want to call them internal, external. You come up with a figurative name, an extended metaphor for each of those things. And you say, writing is like this. And just like this, you have two different sources, right? You have two different energy sources. Maybe you think about it, it's like energy, and then you have sunlight, or you have this, and you come up with something that clearly relates to inside, and you have something that relates to from outside, and then you discuss those two types of sources of inspiration for your writing, and voila, you have your discursive metafictional piece. So just to clarify again, I would avoid the painting thing. It would be metatextual, but yeah, it's metatextual because you'd be writing about trying to paint. But I think writing about writing is just a way easier option. But if you're super, committed to the painting thing, just make that self-reflexive element really clear, like how the painter, because you'd have to be writing about someone painting, which is an odd one. So they're a writer and a painter. The point is that it's from a first-person perspective. So are they a writer or a painter or both? If they're both, then I guess it makes sense. But otherwise, I think it's a hard one to execute. Okay. So let's see what else we've got. Oh, so Michael, I mean, I've just seen your other question for module C, craft of writing. Yeah, I would focus on that crafty feeling. And honestly, what I just described is a pretty solid basis for it. You just need to think about the extended metaphor that goes with it. And then you can use intertextuality. You can have textual examples and authors you're pulling from. But talking about an internal and external source of inspiration for coming up with a piece of writing, a piece of fiction. How do I come up with a piece of fiction? Well, it could come from my memory, or I could escape from my memory and pull from elsewhere. And you can talk about that tension and the types of those two types of writers. That's pretty solid. All right. Just having a look at some other questions here. Star Code Z, I don't know if you're still on here. I'm taking the GED writing test next month. What's the best and fastest way to prepare for it? Any tips would really help. Well, GED writing tests. Let's have a look. So is that for, I'm just looking here. I'm not super familiar with I'm familiar with JeddAI. I was going to say Jed. The Canadian writing test. I'm not super familiar with it, but it looks like I'd have to understand a little bit more about the examination to tell you how to best prepare for it. I don't want to lead you astray. So my initial answer is I'm not 100% sure. In terms of a writing test, I mean, I would be studying the past papers. First of all, if I didn't know about it, I would be looking at the practice papers, understanding the types of questions that are asked, and seeing if you can find any patterns in the types of questions that are being asked. So past papers, practice questions, see if you can identify some trends in the types of questions that get asked, and then practice creating responses that would help address a lot of those typically asked questions. That would be kind of the high level answer there. If I was strategically planning it out, I would just look at heaps of past questions and figure out from there the best and the least that I could do to put myself in the best position. Whether it's doing practice write-outs, or it's having a plan, or it's building certain bits of material that I think I can use for different questions. It's going to depend on what those practice questions are in the exam layout. So sorry, I don't have a better answer than that at the moment. Okay. Oh yeah, this is a common thing as well. So when it comes to writing, I forget what to write. It's really hard for me to start writing. So many people find it hard to start writing, right? They don't know what word to start with or what phrase to start with. And one of the best tips I can give you, especially drawing from Module C, the craft of writing, right, is to look at a passage of text from another writer, someone who has written something really good, probably something that you've studied, and go and find, if you say you have an idea for something that you want to write about, go and find a relevant extract from that author's work and see if you can just to begin with, just take the very first sentence that they had, paste it in, rework it a little bit, say it in your own words, and then there you go, right? And then work off that. So it's like copy paste, change it, but at least you had the style, maintain the style, right? As long as it resonates with you, change it around, make it your own, but work on preserving the style, but changing the wording to suit your purpose. And slowly but surely, you'll be able to depart from that. But I think, again, in addition to the planning advice I gave earlier, which is really important for helping you not get stuck. So let's think about why you're getting stuck to begin with. Have you actually planned out everything? Have you dot pointed every little thing that's going to be in that section of the response? Have you dot pointed and brainstormed all the things that you could talk about? If you haven't done that, then you're not giving yourself a great shot at knowing where to start. So planning and dot pointing all the mini sections of your piece is step one. Step two is, if you're still stuck on how to actually start the sentence, go and have a look at an example by an author. Open up a book, open up a Module C text. Any short kind of piece of writing might be helpful. And just open up to a paragraph, find one that seems like it could work. Look at the very first sentence, pretend it's your first sentence, change that sentence around, and then get going. But again, if you haven't done all the planning and dot pointed everything and brainstormed everything that you'd want to focus on in that section of the piece, you're going to keep getting lost because you're just going to keep needing to make things up. So plan, break everything down before you start writing, and you won't confront this problem nearly as much. Okay, what are some discursive ideas you have with the prescribed text, love and honor, spotty-handed villainesses? Okay, so what are some discursive ideas? I'm just going to focus on the love and honor text, okay? So with love and honor, and obviously it's a much longer title, you've got to think about what that is about and what are the stylistic elements there, right? So that's got a metafictional aspect to it, doesn't it? That one. So metafiction, someone writing about writing. If the person in the story is an author, which you could do as well, then you can have that metafictional element, right? But love and honor, it has this connection, and I'm a little bit. I haven't looked at this text actually for maybe a year. I need to relook at it. But if it's about the connection with the dad and there's a familial connection, just take in familial connection and the metafictional element. You might want to talk about how writing can be a vehicle to preserving a connection with a loved one, right? So pick a person. I mean, it could be a mother, a father, a child, and you're writing as an author, and you're basically writing in an attempt to maintain a connection with that loved one who maybe has, maybe they've died. It doesn't have to be so morbid. Maybe they have basically just left, right? Sometimes people leave the family. They go to another country and they never speak to you again, right? That's obviously very tragic and that's uncommon, but it does happen. So maybe there was a falling out and no one has reached out to the other person. But let's say that there's a family member here related to the author, the person writing, and they've lost a connection with a loved one, again, by death or by choice. So they had an argument, that person's gone away for whatever reason. Them writing about their memories with that person is the way of feeling like they're still connected. So writing as a vehicle for connection could be the thesis or the topic, and you can kind of demonstrate the way they're writing. It's like almost like the writing is reflecting their attempt to like reach for that person, if that makes sense. And you could do some really cool stuff with the form and the way you present it, but it's like their writing is their form of reaching for that connection with that person that they've lost. And you can reflect it in the style and the structure there. Okay, so there's an idea. I mean, we could keep coming up with other ones, but I think just for that love and honor one, if I was focusing on that metafictional element, you've got an author who uses writing as a means of connection. The familial connection thing is they've lost a connection with a loved one, and their writing is, as they write, it's like you can feel them pulling back. They're saying, I need. It's like a sense of desperation coming through the writing. That could make for a really cool piece. Is it a good idea to use a similar structure as Margaret Atwood's Happy Endings text in a Mod C imaginative to make it unique but also self-reflexive? Not familiar with that one, but to make it unique but also self-reflexive. You can play around with any structure, really. I'd have to see that one, Michael, to know exactly. But the key takeaway is having it be self-reflexive, having someone be aware that they are writing something or they're writing a speech to deliver. That's going to be a big bonus if you can execute it. But any structure can work. Just keep it relatively simple. I think just having, the example structure I gave you before was having two types of writers, and having the writer who uses the memory as an internal source of inspiration, and then the writer who kind of tries to escape their memory and create something completely new. It's like have that dichotomy. That's an example taken away from the piece as well. And just quickly on this, am I reading through anything in Google Forms? Well, as I said, I always prioritize the Q&A. So it's unlikely I'm going to get there today, unfortunately. So I apologize if anyone was waiting on that. I had a couple that I've already made comments for as well. So I will go through them in the next one, I hope, or I can just prioritize that and do it first, and I can answer questions. So maybe I'll do that. So you can hold me to it. I will do the review in the next live stream that I do, whether it's next Tuesday or sooner. I'll review. I've got a couple there sitting there, and then I'll keep working through the Google Form submissions. So I'll do my best to get there. Otherwise, just Q&A today on this. Yeah, you can send through structures. Don't send full essays. Don't kind of send one essay as one paragraph because we say only submit a paragraph. If it's longer than 200 words, it's going to get bypassed because we need to be fair to everyone submitting something. So just one kind of reasonably sized paragraph, whether it's an introduction or a body paragraph. The shorter the piece, actually, the more likely it is that it will get looked at because we'll try and get through as many as possible in the coming sessions. I know a lot of you have assessments coming up, so that's how we'll be kind of prioritizing, as well as whoever got in first. All right, Rahan, good to see you again. Sorry, I know you've got another question about JeddAI. With the JeddAI, by the way, have you got it in the imaginative setting? I'm just seeing here. So Rahan uses JeddAI, which is awesome. You're saying it's giving you text response feedback. Make sure in the setting, it doesn't say analytical. Make sure it says imaginative or persuasive, depending on which one you're putting in. And it should change. Well, it will adapt the feedback. Okay. So let me know, send through a screenshot on email to our team if you need any help with that. But send a screenshot of what you're currently doing if that's still not working. But if you change the setting in JeddAI, you can actually upload an imaginative piece or a persuasive or otherwise. Challenging to adapt my piece to the stimulus. How can I do that effectively? Yeah, so you kind of need to, for play, right? You get a title. You need to be somewhat explicit. You want to make the teacher's life easy in the sense that you want to make it obvious how you're adapting a Module C piece or a creative text. You want to make sure that it's very clear how you're linking to the title and to the stimulus. So what you need to do is you need to get the stimulus, and it'd be great if you had an example for us, by the way. Feel free to write it in. If you can provide an example, I'll show you what I would do. But I would basically brainstorm 5 things that are clearly connected with the title or the stimulus. And then I would reference those very early on in the piece, like almost from the first sentence, second sentence. And what I would then do is I would try and use it in a way that best suits my piece, because you should have something drafted. You should have something kind of that you've wanted to write about the topic. But if you get a title and the stimulus is somewhat different, then you need to know how to adapt that. And you need to know how to still use the words of the stimulus and the title, but in a way that suits your prepared piece as well. Now, you don't want to just write a pre-prepared piece, of course, but what you do want to do is have some sophisticated materials that you've practiced, that you've developed, that you can at least use some of. So that's kind of the goal. And Rahan, just resend that in case that got lost in terms of the JeddAI one, and we'll get back to you. I'll even check it after this for you. Okay, so that should be fine. And then for play, yes, we want to. If you have, do you have a particular example for us in terms of play? If say the concept was play, right? PLAY. If you got a particular title or stimulus on that, you might have a draft response, and then you want to adapt, especially the open-in, but also all throughout. You want to adapt it so that it's very clear to the marker how you're linking it. But you need to think more than just literally about the linkage. I always say use life. Life is L for literal. Should you interpret it literally? Or should you interpret it internally? Like, should you internalize the stimulus? Does the stimulus reflect what the character is thinking rather than being something that literally physically exists? F in life is for figurative. So if you get a stimulus for a creative writing task, should you interpret it figuratively, like metaphorically? So it's not a literal thing, but it's figurative in the sense that, say it's the stimulus is something to do with play, and it's got something about not imagination. Let's say it's literally got a couple of kids playing with a basketball, right? Do you have to write about kids playing with a basketball? No, right? If it's a stimulus about kids playing with a basketball, that could symbolize something, right? It could symbolize a childhood connection through play, but it doesn't. But the basketball could just be symbolic, and you say like basketball, or it could be a memory of your character. Like it could be literally a memory of the character from when they were a child playing basketball or playing another ball sport. But I would still draw an analogy to basketball. Basketball might become the metaphor that you use. And you might say that play is like basketball, right? It comes through sharing, right? It comes through striving towards a goal. And you just create an analogy to basketball in that sense. You don't have to literally write about it. It just becomes a metaphor or an analogy, something you compare everything to. Yeah, so Rahan, again, I need an example feel free to send an example, a specific example of a practice question that you wouldn't know how to link, and we could work off that. That would be the best way. Otherwise, I would just think, do you need to interpret it literally, or could you interpret it symbolically or figuratively while still using the actual words of the question? Rahan, make sure you send an email after this with your question, and we can fix that up. Otherwise, Anatic, last question here. For a 2-body paragraph essay, how many quotes would you recommend? I would recommend, generally speaking, 2 bodies, depends how many marks it is. If it's a 20 marker and you're getting 40 minutes to do it, you're going to have quite a lot. I typically try to have at least 12 quotes per essay at the senior level. 12 quotes per essay, which would mean 4 quotes per body paragraph if you did 3 bodies. But yeah, it would kind of mean 6 quotes per body if you did 2. It doesn't mean you need 6 sentences per one for each quote, though. You don't need 1 sentence for 1 quote. You can actually shorten your quotes and have multiple quotes in 1 sentence. You can also combine techniques into 1 sentence. So if you do 2 bodies, maybe you'll have 5 sentences of analysis in each, and you've embedded a couple of extra quotes within those 5 sentences. So a couple of them are doubles, effectively. So that's how I would go about it. But 12 is always the goal for a senior level essay. But the quotes can be very short. A lot of students do these really long quotes. It just takes away from the flow. It's taking valuable time away from your own analysis. You're just quoting the text. You're not going to get marks for that. Or you're not going to get any extra marks for it being a long one. You'll actually lose marks because it's less time on the analysis. So try and use the shortest amount of the shortest number, the fewest number of words from a quote to still be relevant and still be an example of what you're saying, but allow you to almost use lots of short quotes versus 1 long quote. That's how you can kind of get around that issue as well, especially for a 2-body paragraph. And Thank you very much. Yeah, so Anatic, for a 20-mark essay, what I said, aim for 12 quotes, try and make them a lot shorter. And you can use multiple quotes per sentence of analysis. So you could even have 4 to 5 sentences of analysis between your topic sentence and your link sentence. Do 2 of those, introduction, conclusion. There you go. And thank you very much. I appreciate the feedback. Guys. I hope this is helping. I'm trying to work as best I can with the information I'm given. So Rahan, I definitely want to help you a little further as well. If I can get an actual example from you of a practice question, I can go through a stimulus adaptation example with you and everyone else. Let's do that in the next session. If you can jump on in the next one, similar time next week, guys. Tuesday, 7:30. Rahan, send that email as well, just so you know we're not missed anything. And thank you very much. And a final question from Alex Lynn. No worries. Appreciate the join nonetheless, as late as it is. It's all good. A lot of people come on around this time, I have found. It's too bad my voice just ends up going after 90 minutes of this end of the day. But how does wide reading improve English beyond HSE? Wide reading, just reading a lot, how does it improve English beyond HSE? It improves your vocabulary, first of all. Like, you just get a better understanding of more words, and you know how to use better words in more situations. So you can be a lot more concise with your expression. So whenever you have to write something, whether it is a university piece, whether it's an email later, oh sure, ChatGPT can write on my email, sure, but you need to know how to instruct it. You need to know what a good email even looks like from an AI-generated response. So having a better vocabulary will give you more control over those things, because even AI is only as good as the person feeding it the information and the instruction. You're still guiding it, and you're still checking it, right? You're reviewing it. And if you don't have a large vocabulary and an understanding of syntax and how sentences are structured and how to use paragraphs properly, those kind of fundamental things that you get from wide reading and being exposed to different expressions and structures and vocabulary mean that you're going to have a very limited ability to capitalize on artificial intelligence, but also AI aside, a very limited ability to express yourself concisely and in an effective way. If you want to be an effective communicator, you need to read wide. I actually historically have not been a great reader. I have forced myself to read a lot of the time because I know how important it is. But I have, when I land on, a good novel or even a self-help book or a nonfiction how-to, I do find myself just getting engrossed in it. But it's a matter of giving yourself that opportunity and that time, even if it's like at the end of the day, half an hour, just force yourself to open up that first page, and you might find yourself lost in it before you know it. But a lot of people just are scrolling through their phone now all the time. That's been going on for 10 to 15 years now, but it's worse than ever. And no one's ever even bothering to open up the first page of the book. Only like the real natural readers are doing so. And I wasn't a natural reader myself. But I wanted to do it because I wanted to be smarter. I wanted to grow my vocabulary. And again, if you rely on AI to do those things for you, you're just going to be completely dependent on it, which is the worst possible fate. You really want a life ahead of you where you can't actually think for yourself because you never bothered to learn to read enough or communicate properly with good vocabulary, a wide vocabulary, so that you could actually operate independently of some AI. So that's the kind of conversation we need to be having, that if you don't read widely and you don't develop your communication skills and your interpretive skills and your vocabulary, your ability to express yourself through writing, you will limit your ability to think. You will limit your ability and therefore put yourself at a disadvantage compared to others in terms of using artificial intelligence. You won't be able to use it. You need to be intelligent to use artificial intelligence intelligently, right? Like, it's only as good as its maker. So, and what I mean by its maker is the person feeding it the information, the instruction, at least at present. I mean, let's wait until it's completely autonomous. But for now, when you give it an instruction, you can make it basic, but how are you going to, again, check through it properly, right? You need to actually have that prior understanding, the prior knowledge. So that's why it's important to do wide reading. But I'm not going to like sit here and preach to you that you should all be doing it. Again, it wasn't natural to me. I forced myself to do it, especially since finishing school. I did it for all the kind of classics while I was at school, thankfully, so I didn't miss out on that. But I forced myself to do it because I knew that when I did land on a good one, I really enjoyed it. But I knew that it was a great opportunity for me to improve my vocabulary, if nothing else, right? And improving your vocabulary means you can express ideas and you can communicate more concisely and more precisely. Concision and precision, right? If I want to say exactly what I mean, I need the right words to communicate it. But if I don't have those words, I have to say things in a roundabout way that kind of misses the mark when it comes to what I'm trying to say. So that's kind of the key thing, but I'm not going to preach to you about it. Do your best to read as much as possible. I know it's hard. Find something you enjoy reading. Find a topic you enjoy. Any excuse to read something. It's good practice for focus and attention, and that's another big benefit of it. That it's actually you're processing slow. You're processing information slow, which is really healthy for you because you digest it properly, versus intaking information super fast. Think about phones when you're scrolling on Reels, TikTok, whatever it is. How fast are you just going through things? It's so fast. Slow it down with a book that you enjoy. Find something that you're interested in. Consume the exact same thing that you were watching as a reel in text, and you absorb it a little bit better because it's slower. You're having to read across. You have more time to take it in and actually reconcile all the information that you're ingesting. So you need to become critical about what goes into your brain, because right now, basically every person is just dumping all of this information unsolicited into their brain, and it's basically giving all of us brain fog. You've probably all felt that yourself. It's very hard to think clearly when you've got so much information coming in from all angles at such a fast speed. It's the velocity of information that it basically will rob you of your ability to think for yourself. Like you'll just be lost without all of that stimulus. Anyway, a bit of a tangent there. It's getting late. Thanks for joining. We'll see you in the next one. Hope you enjoyed, and hope it was helpful. Good luck.